Military people have read it. Who was the how the frick did he pass basic training guy? This guy was a student in aviation school while I was an instructor. He was a new soldier attending his technical school after basic. Apparently he was on the autism spectrum but functioned well enough for the army. He was great at physical tasks. That's how he passed basic. He was also very intelligent in the classroom study. If he was directly instructed he was fine. One day I found him in the hall between classrooms during a class session. He had taken a restroom break but got sidetracked and was staring deeply into the ceiling fan. It took several attempts to get his attention. I had to touch his arm when he didn't respond to my approach or calling his name a few times. It happened a few times with other instructors until our supervisor addressed it with the division chief. It was decided after several medical consultations and meetings with the colonel that it wasn't safe to allow this student to proceed as a helicopter mechanic. It was ultimately a safety matter because he could get mesmerized by a spinning rotor on an airfield. Strangely, I saw him later on a deployment to Afghanistan. He was reclassified as an artillery soldier, ceiling fan, helicopter mechanic. Freaking lost it right there. Worked with a USAF major long ago who'd been in grade 4 ENs because he couldn't give a briefing without scratching his balls. Only the Vietnam War was keeping him in the service. Eventually he went on an orientation tour of a Minuteman site and fell into a hole. When he got out of the hospital they retired him. He must really have itchy balls. You find officers like this too. Not lacking basic competencies, just common sense. We had a water leak at the Naval Medical Center and the department head, 06, simply kicked off her shoes so they wouldn't get wet. Part of the ceiling in the space had collapsed and the computer tower was sitting on the floor in the puddle along with her feet. It and the outlet was throwing sparks and you could see the blue light of arcing electricity inside the tower. Didn't stop working until the first IT3 got there to point it out. You could feel the electricity in that room. At basic, we had a guy who did a version of the Christian Bale deep Batman voice for the entire time and never took off his eye protection. Terrifying to be woken up by him for guard duty in the middle of the night. He would just loom over you and say your name while jabbing you violently with his hands. Apparently, his underwear eventually fused to his body because he didn't shower for weeks. The stench was miserable. From what I heard, he was put on suicide watch a couple of weeks after basic, but he passed basic. There was a guy next to me on the shooting range. We were supposed to fire a full mag at the target, 29 rounds. Well, when we were done his target had 0 hits, and mine had around 50. Honestly, it was me. Joined the Marines at 17 as an artilleryman. Didn't know at the time that I had high functioning autism. I could follow instructions well enough, so I got through basic without any real trouble. But I just didn't have much common sense in my head at the time. I didn't like to socialize and was very awkward beyond simple order following things. I got messed with to no end, and wound up beating the snot out of myself from the stress during Fleet Week. Eventually we got deployed to Iraq as civil affairs, and I was put in administrative and office duties, and found I was especially good at office work. In the end, it was a positive experience though. I was forced into having a lot more social interactions than I would have as a civilian, and I was able to work on things like that a lot more than I would have if I had not joined. I still had a lot of trouble after leaving the Marines because it was right at the start of the recession, but I would have been even worse off otherwise. We had a guy we called Domestic Pepsi. His surname was Internicola. Get it? He was dumber than a bag of hammers. One day, we had a big inspection. Company commander inspecting. The commander eventually made his way to Domestic Pepsi and started asking questions about general Marine Corps knowledge. This recruit does not know, sir. This recruit does not know, sir. Sir, this recruit doesn't know. Finally, our commander asked him, son, you don't even know if you're alive, do you? There was the longest pause following the question. Then a small, quiet, and incredibly confused voice replied, sir, this recruit does know that he's alive, sir. It's like he actually had to think about it. In his small and intimidated head, he was probably going through all 7 of the facts he knew and seriously asked himself, am I alive? The whole squad bay of hardened, nearly graduated Marine recruits and our drill instructors all burst into laughter. How he actually graduated, I have no idea. Yes, Marines are a bunch of crayon-eating morons. But domestic Pepsi was the guy who would have choked to death on the paper sheaths on each crayon. The lad who shat himself and didn't want to let people know, so threw his crappy kit with an actual log inside the trousers into the group wash. Freaking rotter. The 2 females and 2 males who got caught fraternizing in the briefing room the night before pass out and somehow managed to not get day zeroed for it. The lad who tried to give himself a neck shave and buzzed a racing stripe 5 inches up the back of his head. The lad who broke his nose trying to impress Nkos with a backflip. The lad who was going for gunner who couldn't for the life of him figure out how to sling a rifle. Spent 5 hours practicing, crying and crap. Couldn't hack it, and after passing out eventually months after everyone else, got kicked out for drugs. Sold equipment including his gas mask, tack vest and helmet. Started fights with fellow recruits almost every week, threatened to bring his gang to shoot us up. Still passed. Go figure. Getting immunization needles. I overheard the nurse asking about medical family history. My family has a history of hypothermia. During field training with blank rounds, had 2 negligent discharges, ended up being charged for both. Threw their rifle down and started casing black magic on the rifle. If he was referring to malignant hypothermia, that's a very real, very serious issue. We had one guy in my basic training platoon that was a walking safety hazard. Among other things, he managed to fall out of a first floor window, got a quarter of the platoon's packs, the squad's packs, stolen during an exercise because he fell asleep watching them, fired his rifle on full auto into the fricking camp with training rounds, luckily, because he thought he saw a wild pig rifling through our stuff, and, to cap it all off, put a live round between the drill instructor's feet at the firing range. He passed basic with the rest of us. The only guy that failed because he deserted halfway through, although he did get a mark in his file that he was unsuited for any rank with any kind of responsibility. Edit. Does anyone know what the next lower organizational unit below a platoon is called? I was in the German army and have been racking my brain for the English word ever since I posted this. The German word just translates to group, which I highly doubt is the correct term. Squad. Thanks guys. I fixed it up above. Squad. One of the kindest, sweetest, least aggressive people I know was in the Marines with me. Just a teddy bear. It's not so much that I don't know how he managed, although it was puzzling, and more that I have no idea why he wanted to. A lot of super tough dudes are very nice because nobody is willing to test them. FUS Army here. Thankfully my story didn't make it out of basic, but dang, I would like to punch the recruiter that put her in square in the jaw. This girl was 5 feet 2 inches and probably weighed less than 90 pounds. She was so frail she looked like she was going to snap under the weight of her lunch tray. She was given twice as much time to eat and twice as much food as the rest of us in an effort to put some weight on her. She never ate it, just poked it for 20 minutes then threw it away. She was clearly developmentally disabled. Soldiers call each other retarded all the time as a joking insult. This wasn't the case. She was actually developmentally disabled. During reception, 1-2 weeks of in-processing before actual basic training starts, I had to teach her how to button her pants, lace her boots, and do her laundry. She was young, maybe 18. Her boyfriend was over 40. In reception, she would be on the phone with him every waking moment possible. She was caught on multiple occasions furiously masturbating in the corner of the bay while on the phone with him. She couldn't understand that it was inappropriate. Once we shipped to actual training, she ended up in my company but a different training platoon than me. She made it 4 weeks before they took her weapon away because she wouldn't stop flagging people, accidentally aiming it at someone with it. Also, she could barely hold it up. The 9 pounds M16A2 was too heavy for her. She got moved to the separation company around week 5, never saw her again. That was 9 years ago. I think about her sometimes and wonder if she's okay. Had a kid at my first squadron, Air Force, who was quite possibly one of the dumbest, least self-aware people I've ever met. This kid either couldn't or wouldn't retain basic information, which was problematic given that he was in the intelligence career field. At one point he was presenting a briefing about North Korea and claimed with a straight face that the capital city of North Korea was Bogota. For those keeping score, Bogota is the capital of Colombia. He tried very hard to project a redneck persona, and as part of this bought a massive bright red lifted truck with obnoxious redneck decal work. Anyone with half a brain could tell you he was struggling to pay for it on his measly E3 barracks rat pay. Eventually he decided he didn't want to pay for the truck anymore, so he drove it into a lake one night and filed an insurance claim, then used the money to immediately buy a different vehicle. This was quickly uncovered by the police, and he was kicked out of the Air Force. To this day I have no earthly idea who thought this kid belonged in military intelligence, or how he got through intel school. I got kinda hung up on the part that he wanted to be seen as redneck. From what I understand, non-American, redneck is just slang insult for people with guns and beer for brains. There was this super nasty dude in our platoon that smelled terrible, and the squad leader figured out it's because he washed his clothes by putting them in the freezer overnight. He also got busted malingering by purposely not hydrating in the desert heat, passing out, and having to get IVs from the medics. He did it to get out of work. Eventually they did a home health and wellness check, off base, and found 12 dogs living in his 2-bedroom apartment and the floor thick as carpet with dog crap. All he was a 35 series. Intelligence. Some scout from a cav company that I was attached to as intel support somehow always showed up when I was washing my feet. My feet got so gross in the desert and baby wipes didn't cut it. One day he got the courage to approach me from around a sand dune and asked where I'm from. I said, Iowa. He said, isn't that in Nebraska? Also a woman I was in basic training with who had to have been on the spectrum. We had to teach her and coach her on how to shower. Otherwise she just stood under the water for 30 seconds. She fell asleep while live firing on the qualification range. A lot of us complained to our PG because we would wake up with her staring at us from the end of our bunks, crouched down like a freaking animal. That's all I remember now. But she graduated. I wonder what happened to her. Hope she's okay. Had a girl who would hit herself in the face when she got upset. Like, full hard slaps. It was unnerving to watch. She's also hide candy and food from the mess deck and eat it alone in the head. Bathroom. Our racks, beds, were next to each other, separated by a thin piece of metal with small holes punched in it for air circulation. One night I was reading a book and she asked me how I liked it. I asked her how she knew what I was reading and she said she was watching me through the holes in the partition. This girl made it through the recruiter, MEPS, where they do a psych eval, and boot camp. Clearly someone dropped the ball. Self-injury and food hoarding are both signs of childhood abuse. I hope she got help. I've had the pleasure of serving with a few of those types. The two most memorable are, went through basic with this kid. This dude had literally never a day in his life prior done anything physical, ever. He had a permanent hunchback from sitting on the couch all his life. He was literally purple because his circulation sucked. His arms had the bat wings of an 80-year-old woman, and he honest to God had a wattle, which led to his unfortunate nickname of Turkey. He legitimately couldn't do 5 push-ups, a single sit-up. This dude couldn't even jump high enough to grab onto a pull-up bar, let alone do a pull-up. Failed every single PT test we took. The drills actually called his mother, and the army paid for her to fly out, so she could give encouragement so maybe he would finally pass one. Home Slice still graduated with us, because the drills couldn't be asked to chapter him and wanted his gaining unit to take the flak instead. Second dude was a real special case. 100% a Goma pile type of situation. Only a few peanuts rattling around the can. He got to us right around the same time as What Does the Fox Say was a big deal. He considered it his favorite song, and sang it nearly constantly. He honest to God thought he was a cat, and would lick himself randomly meow at us. Dude was white as crap, but every other week he'd be repping a different gang. Typically one that doesn't recruit white folk. His favorite was Latin Kings. I think he just liked yellow. We'd catch him staring at walls and crap, completely zoned out. We got orders to deploy, and nobody wanted him with us. But sadly he came along. Leadership took his firing pin, and he guarded the DFAC for the whole deployment. As soon as we got back he was chaptered for mental instability. A few of my guys are still Facebook friends with him, and according to him he was freaking John Rambo himself overseas, single-handedly clearing buildings and crap. Army guy here. I went to basic with this one guy, OML. Let's start from the top. Almost shot a drill sergeant. Got a staph infection and refused to get medicine. Slept in his wall locker during toe the line. Toe the line is when you stand right by your bunks quiet at the position of attention and wait for your drill sergeant. Would listen to the DS explain what you would have to do, and the DS would ask if there was any questions and not ask at that time, but then 5 minutes later ask him a dumbass question. Oh my god, all of them. I was part of the CADA 4-8 technical school, considered part 2 of basic, and I had to file a lot of paperwork for my dumbasses. Here's a highlight reel. One of my guys ran into a pole and broke his face. Twice. On the same pole. The ink hadn't even dried on the first report before he did it the second time. Somehow a rumor started that if you could put your PT belt on a deer you'd be exempt from PT. There was an entire week where we had to keep soldiers from sneaking out the barracks with excessive number of PT belts. Except we hadn't figured out why yet. Then by some sick twist of fate a deer actually ran throughout morning formation. Like, through it, and it was just a hailstorm of PT belts at the poor thing. I had one get all the way through the training just to discover the week before he graduated that he was at the wrong 8. He was supposed to be learning a completely different specialty. I didn't even know that could happen. Health and welfare inspections are always a nightmare. None of these chuckleheads do laundry half as often as they should, and half don't do it at all. Then there's the really gross finds. Like bags of used sanitary products that they can't find the motivation to walk 100 yards to the dumpsters for. Ugh. A hurricane came through 1 month and there was a conspiracy to jump off the barracks with makeshift parachutes. We successfully prevented that incident and Welder got away without filing paperwork if one of them hadn't bragged about it while raking leaves at BN. 1. I crap you not. Could not spell his own name. A lot come through not knowing cursive and I figured that was the reason he was having trouble, so I said he could print on the dotted line. Mother sucker misspelled his own name. Then there was the butt plug incident. Honestly, the less said, the better. This isn't including the petty high school bulls these brats get up to. He said, she said, start a fight to defend my H-on or SRNT. The straight up crimes that happen, usually involving alcohol or smuggled fried chicken, and general tomfoolery, losing important equipment. You'd think this'd be a reason to fear for our military's capabilities, right? Nope. I would not unleash those terrors on anyone except our worst enemies. Lord have mercy on them, cause these shitlords can't even spell the word. I would like to hear more about the butt plug, and whatever sort of crime would involve smuggled fried chicken. We had a guy called Tom Sawyer. His list of offenses was shaving in the shower hall, pulling his molars out with pliers, cutting his toenails and saving them above his wall locker. Well, he sounds like a modern day warrior with a mean stride. First night of actual basic, after shark attack and all that BS, we're all showering and getting ready for bed. I noticed a guy in the bunk across from me had already changed into his PTs. I asked him if he was gonna shower and he said, no. I put on 48-hour deodorant. The entire bay erupted into laughter, and for the rest of basic, my guy's name was Private 48. Kind of a badass name. Also sounds like a retarded knockoff of Soldier 76. After basic training I was at tech school in a squadron that trains air traffic controllers, airfield managers, command post, and area space control and warning systems. Had 3 people I want to get past basic. 1. The person who tossed a whole unopened box of Hot Pockets into a microwave, set it for 5 minutes, and left their door room. 2. The person who got second-degree burns when they tried to iron their uniform while wearing it. 3. The girl who would hiccup, sounded like she was trying to imitate a raptor from Jurassic Park, in formation, or whenever people weren't paying attention to her. Sounded like she was trying to imitate a raptor from Jurassic Park. Clever girl. At one of my duty stations there was a girl that wasn't all there. One day, out of the blue, she decides to take the 3-wheel bike, the one with the large basket in between the 2 rear tires, and go for a spin. She hit a fence post, a parked car and a dumpster, all within 30 feet of her starting position. She eventually went to cook school. 3-wheel bike. You would call that a trike. Oh, there have been so many of these. Let's see, first was SGT stubby. On aircraft we have these things called vanaxle fans. Think of a high amperage DC powered fan with blades that are about 2 mm thick. These things usually have a tubular housing for air channeling reasons and spin so fast they are near invisible. For whatever reason he decided to check if it was spinning and stuck his hand down the backside of one of these things and stick a finger in. The end result was a clean severance at the first knuckle. I watched this same guy fall asleep on the wing of an Apache while trying to install a clamp on a drain line and roll forward off the wing. He hit the hellfire rack on the way down, which broke his fall and his arm. The next guy was a career SPC. If I remember correctly, he was at 8 years in when I met him. He was probably somewhere on the spectrum, but that was before autism was really in the mainstream, so most people thought he was high on chromosomes. He was horrible at coping with stresses and would high side on the regular. He came in one day and had a grey undershirt on back when they were supposed to be brown. I asked him if he was wearing a PT shirt underneath his top, to which he excitedly declared of course not. At that point I told him to look down, which he did. Then in the span of about 2 seconds grabbed both sides of his collar, zips his hands and collars tight across his neck, and then without a word runs full speed for the door. He clips the door frame and eats it outside and then disappears for about an hour and shows back up with a brown shirt and no recollection of anything ever happening. About 3 weeks later, he shows up to work and during morning uniform inspection I get to him and notice he is wearing 2 left boots. He didn't even notice he had 2 left boots. Fast forward a couple more weeks and I'm walking with him out to a helicopter and he is carrying a torque wrench. Evidently his hand stops working like a normal hand and this torque wrench slips right out of his fingers, hits his boot and gets punted about 40 feet down the flight line. These are calibrated tools, so if they drop more than a foot they are supposed to get coded out and sent back for a call. He just walks his happy butt up to it, looks at me and stares at me while he picks the wrench up and then starts sauntering back out towards the aircraft. I call him on it and he is dead but bewildered that he would be told to go get a new torque wrench. For every quality dude, there is someone equally horrible and no one seems quite sure how she got there. We basically had a Goma from Full Metal Jacket who during a few times in basic training I was actually concerned was going to murder all of us from the abuse he received. I, similarly to Joker, was assigned to unfuck this recruit, which unfortunately I was unable to do regardless of the instruction, advice or positive reinforcement offered. I am convinced he was mentally unable to handle what was going on. He still contacts me about once a year 14 years later. I met so many. One of my soldiers never passed a PT test, not once. Not in basic, not in the real army, never. We need the personnel and we knew he wouldn't pass, so we stopped testing him. Same guy wouldn't shower. Spent 2 weeks in 100-degree desert and he didn't shower when we got back. Then there was the guy who was just plain dumb. Like he had a spare tire in his car and a flat tire on his car, and the reason he hadn't changed them was because he couldn't figure out where the lug nuts on the flat tire were. Not basic. I think the story still applies. I was in airborne school in the old crappy DFAC and one of the cadre is yelling at this bald kid with no eyebrows, "What the frick, you goth piece of crap. Don't you know this is against AR 670-1 blah blah." The kid was like, "I have alopecia LOL." We had one of those. We called him Space Monkey. Female. This time, she got to her very first unit and was continuously late and argumentative with her sergeants. Just up and quit on motor pool duties a couple times, refusing to check oil levels. No idea how she got past her drill sergeant, but her entire time on active duty lasted all of 4 months before she found herself signing her discharge paperwork at JAG. There was also the guy who ended up with smallpox on his penis. We had just gotten our vaccines and they warned us not to touch the pox that appeared because it might spread to other areas. The guy swore that the band-aid fell off and he accidentally sat on it, but everyone knew he had scratched his injection site and then jerked off. Vaccinia, cowpox, not variola, smallpox, but wow, what a rare STD. We had a guy who just kept losing crap. He showed up to morning formation in a downpour without his rain jacket, and when asked just spouted, "I lost IT Master Corporal." We all had to go the day without a rain jacket. Another time he had gotten called to speak with a board of officers to see if he should stay or not, and as per the standard he had lost his beret and needed to borrow one. I, being sympathetic, lent him mine, and by the end of the day had reported back to me that he had lost my beret. He was also a cheapskate. A few of us on our infantry course would carpool when we got weekend leave and he never pitched for gas. So we just left him. He wasn't super thrilled next time we saw him. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.